Hi, everyone. Coming to you from Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm Scott Harrison, Artistic Director of Ironweed Productions, and I want to welcome you to Talking Theater Santa Fe, a series of conversations between me and Santa Fe theater artists, sharing stories about their experiences in the theater and the unique paths that led them to creating theater in Santa Fe. I'm incredibly honored to have as my guest today Santa Fe actor, writer, director, lighting designer, and musician, Matt Sanford. Matt, I'm so thrilled for the conversation today.
Me too. I'm very, very overjoyed and very grateful to be here.
Great to be here with you. A little bit more about Matt before we get started. Matt Sanford is a theater artist and Santa Fe native with over 100 credits as an actor, director, writer, designer, and technician in film and theater. On-stage roles include Macbeth, Dracula, Vince in Buried Child, The Gentleman Caller in The Glass Menagerie, and both twins in the original comedy Dead Man's Jest. He's directed a number of new and original works, as well as published plays, including a lauded production of Connor McPherson's The Weir. Prior to the pandemic, Matt most recently appeared as Jasper in Ironweed's stunning production of Annie Baker's The Aliens, directed by Lynn Goodwin. Matt has spent much of his professional life encouraging and cultivating young theater artists as well, throughout performing outreach and creating workshops at Warehouse 21, serving as assistant director to Pandemonium's children's theater for 4 years, teaching acting, writing, and directing for children and teens through Chimera, and teaching technical theater to high school students in and around Santa Fe through the Lensic Theater for the Performing Arts. In keeping with his personal and professional values, Matt believes it is vital to share the human experience through the medium of storytelling in order to preserve our collective sense of empathy, sympathy, and love for each other. I love that. In addition to theatrical arts, Matt is also a published poet, photographer, visual artist, and musician, playing ambient guitar compositions under the name Masks. He lives full-time in Santa Fe with his wife, Scarlett, daughter, Hero May, and the latest addition, his son, Desmond Evergreen. So Matt, I was thinking about our conversation today, and I was just, this first thing isn't actually a question. It's I was just remembering back to all the different chapters that I've known you as an artist and a person in Santa Fe, and I'm just remembering back on that, and all the way back to the first time, which I want to talk about a little bit more. But the first time that I ever saw you was on stage in Bat Boy the musical at Santa Fe High, which was like 2003 or
Yeah.
I remember I saw you on stage at Theater Work, then in Robert Knott's, the plays that you all worked on together, which I definitely want to talk about. We worked together with Ironweed, with Trip to Bountiful, which you were in and also assistant directed. Got to be on stage together in Buried Child, which Mona Malik directed. And also collaborated together on the Ironweed artistic team, and seeing your work last year in the production of The Aliens. And during COVID, during this whole period, for me, it's just been a period also of being just looking to gratitude and feeling grateful. Mm-hmm. And I just want to start off by saying just how grateful I am for all the chapters that we've been able to share together as artists and people over the last 17 years or so. So
I really appreciate that, and I feel 100% the same way. It's like you say, looking back on this year, there's so much time and opportunity for perspective and really looking at what is important, what is valuable in our lives as human beings and as artists. And certainly that time and these relationships with you and some of the people that you've mentioned, looking back on that history is like so valuable, and I'm equally very, very grateful.
Oh, cool. It's I know what you mean too about just having this kind of space and time around this period we've been in, mm-hmm. which I want to we'll definitely talk about that more as well. I'm interested, I always interested at the beginning of these conversations with people's kind of first memory of just being captured by make believe. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a theater experience. It can just be, like for me, it was like playing with my, my GI Joes and my $6 Million Man. And but I just wonder for you, like, what's your earliest memory of just being captured by make believe?
There's, I think back to really early in my childhood, and there's a few that really stick out to me as being sort of formative experiences for me, in terms of storytelling and make believe and pretend. And certainly one that really rings out for me was just playing with the pots and pans at my grandparents' house in their kitchen. They had this house over on Pacheco Street, which was on the same compound, right next door to the house that I grew up in, which had been in our family, on my mom's side of the family, since the 1600s. And so having that relationship and that proximity to my grandparents, and sort of the encouragement that they gave me to sort of just be weird and be myself, was always very liberating. And so I have this really distinct memory of playing like knights and dragons in their kitchen on the floor, and just pulling out every single pot and pan and sieve and wooden spoon and like weird kitchen gadget, and wearing a sieve on my head and using a pot lid as a shield, and having a whisk as a sword or something. And I just remember terrorizing their kitchen with this really clear sense of just like this super complex narrative that I had in my mind about like me being this like magic wizard knight fighting this evil dragon that lived in the furnace room at their house. It was like so clear in my mind at that age. And it just felt so true. It just felt so true to inhabit that space and like really, really fill out and flesh out the details of that story and these characters and this reality inside of that. And so that's one memory that just like really looking back on it makes sense for me. Like I can see the arc from that moment to now.
Yeah.
Which and that was like very much encouraged and cultivated in this really, in a lot of ways, great experience that I had with a lot of my cousins. Growing up in Santa Fe, everybody has like 6 million cousins, and a percentage of them all lived on the same street as me as well. So it's like, I had my grandparents next door, and I had all these cousins living down the street. And before Pacheco Street was like super developed and kind of gentrified, there were these huge sort of fields with like, there was even a little creek that ran next to the railroad tracks behind my cousin's house, where the rail trail runs now. And it was the same thing, after school, we would walk home from school and we just had these really clear stories and make believes and pretends that we would just play out for hours and hours and hours, that were informed by comic books that we were reading, or whatever the latest episode of Full House was about. And it's just like all of these weird sort of bombardments of media of the early 90s fed this sense of imagination and play that again, just felt like so natural and so free in being able to be someone else and somewhere else, and tell these stories and have these feelings in a way that is safe. And so that for me, I think, just really laid the foundation for me moving into telling stories.
That's cool. That's so funny. I mean, because when you're talking about that, it reminded me of I just remember my thing, like my first time kind of, I think I remember kind of as a young person, like putting myself in something where I felt like it was real, like imagined circumstances that were real. Was like that when I was younger, the $6 Million Man was super popular, that show. And they had a $6 Million Man action figure, which for me, like at that time, was like the coolest thing in the world. And so I had one. But what I would do is I would put him in a shoebox, and I would kind of tie his hands with yarn, and I'd put like a little piece of tape over his mouth. And then I would have my parents And then I would put a little timer, a little like egg timer or a little timer in there, that little ticking timer. And I would have my parents like hide him somewhere in the house. Like, and I was like, and I would play like the theme music in my head, like dun, dun, dun. And I'd be like trying to like find, like I had 30 minutes to find him before like he would explode. Anyway, it's just, and like
Oh
you were
man.
saying, like it felt real. It's like, oh my
Yeah.
God, because there were some times when I found him, and there were some times when unfortunately I didn't. So
Where he was, yeah, kaboom.
anyway, yeah, well that's really that's cool. So you said, so your grandparents kind of just kind of nurtured that feeling of that kind of playfulness and
Yeah, everyone in my family definitely did. My parents and my grandparents. I think for whatever reason, and I see it in my own kids too. And I try to nurture it in them, trying to like really throw back to the experience of being that age. I think that children, when we are children, there's just like this innate sense of weirdness that is so beautiful. And I think it's so sad to see so many situations and families and XYZ where that kind of gets stifled or quieted in kids. And I was really lucky because everybody in my family was just like, wow, he's weird, let's run with that. uh, and I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful that because my weirdness is such a big part of who I am, that I think that if that was quenched or quelled in any kind of way, I would be a very different, much more sad person, I think. And so yeah, there was a lot of encouragement to just roll with those impulses and that feeling of being strange.
that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Did so it's interesting when you were describing, yeah, you get these kind of epic tales, that you were creating, because it made me think of I just love the and I was talking to Christina about these in a previous interview. The plays that you did at Warehouse 21 with Robert Knott and that's what it made me think, because they were so wonderfully written and performed, and there was always also just that incredible swashbuckling sword scene that would always happen, and it always had the epic music. And I don't know, did you kind of that kind of stuff, is that, it sounds like that's kind of been with you from a young age. Talk about with Robert, kind of how that piece of it kind of was something that you all revisited a lot.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, growing up, I have really clear memories. If anybody watching was familiar with mine and Robert's work in the past, it's all very like vaudevillian, slapstick, references to Three Stooges, Marx Brothers, old westerns, all the old swashbucklers, like you mentioned. And I grew up with a lot of those. And again, it's another one of those experiences that I feel very grateful for, because I feel like a lot of people my age had very limited or no exposure to a lot of that media history, and so I have these really clear memories. My dad had this VHS copy of, and not even an original copy. It was like, a blank VHS that we recorded the Marx Brothers Duck Soup off of TV. And I literally watched that tape to death. It wouldn't play anymore for how much I watched it.
Yeah.
And so at a very young age, I had this exposure to this era of Hollywood and this era of media that was the Marx Brothers, that was, the old John Wayne movies, even media that existed at the time that was maybe perhaps a little inappropriate for my age. it was just part of my childhood. You know, one of the first words that I could write legibly was the word Beetlejuice, because at like 5 or 6 years old, I was watching Tim Burton's Beetlejuice like almost every day in the afternoon, which is
Yeah.
not a movie that, like, you know, a 5 or 6 year old should probably be watching that often. But again, you know, that sense of humor, the sort of aesthetics of this wide variety of media really informed me early on.
Hmm.
And so later in life, when I ended up meeting Robert Knott, who is also tremendously weird, I was like, there was like this validation in someone older than me, but you know, who was a mentor to me, having those sort of shared experiences. And so a lot
Hmm.
of our work came out of understanding those films and a lot of the music of different time periods and stuff like that. And so it was just this really great sort of perfect storm of all these influences and experiences coming together to sort of make a mashup of that and spit something new out.
Hmm.
That was a little more self-referential, that had a little bit more, hopefully, depth or like perspective to
Hmm.
them.
Hmm.
Which you know, even over the course of the last few years, I look back on and I'm like, oh, you know, we could have maybe done that differently or addressed that differently. But generally speaking, you know, it has always been throughout the, you know, almost 20 years that I've known Robert as well, uh, like immensely rewarding to work on those pieces from that point of view.
Right.
You
Right.
know, of
Yeah.
all that different history and all of those different experiences that to a lot of people, to a lot of younger generations, have sort of been lost to time.
Yeah.
Or that's my sense anyway. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's interesting. And one of the things I loved about those productions too is that it was like the comedy was so the comic technique that everyone in the cast had. I mean, actors of all young people of all different ages and experience levels was so sharp, you know, and like finely etched. I mean, it was so well done. And I mean, the cool thing was for me watching it was it had this incredible, really precise comic technique in these stories with these wide range of actors, but it also had just this amazing spirit, you know. I mean, it just had this life force that you just, yeah, you just couldn't help but get caught up in. They were really a treat to watch. What was it like to work? Because I know you working with young people is something that for you is just as a passion. What was it like working as a writer, a director, actor amongst, you know, these young actors of all different experience levels?
Well, I mean, it was great because, you know, there's always a sense, I think, from any artist of like wanting to pass pass along your experience and pass along what you know, whether it's helpful or not, I don't know. But I think we all kind of experience that as artists and certainly as educators. And so in those experiences, in those productions, it was like so exciting to me to, like I say, share those films, share that music,
Mhm.
um, share all of those influences
Mhm.
with actors and individuals who may not have had that exposure otherwise, you know. And then working with them, one of the things that Robert and I always really stressed in our process, was always collaboration and treating everybody equally. You know, and that's something that I learned and really credit to Robert. I learned from him in the first production that I did with him, that was co-written with a friend of mine, Winston Shaw, back
Mhm.
at the old warehouse.
Mhm.
And and Robert, in that first process working with Robert treated all of us as adults and as equals to him in the process. And so I learned the value of doing that, because I think it's really easy to say, oh, there's this sea of inexperience between us. I'm going to be the one that tells you or shows you XYZ the way things need to be done because I have more experience or I'm older or whatever. Which we never did with our casts and crews in those shows. It was always 100% collaborative. You know, if something wasn't working, whether it was in our writing or our directing, we would always turn it back to the cast, even if you know, it was actors who were 14, 15 years old, all the way up to you know, my own peers who at the time were in our early 20s working on this stuff. We would all just sort of hash it out and say, okay, we Robert and I might be wrong. How do we fix that? How do we make it the best it can be? And so sharing that with the perspectives of, you know, high school age actors, middle school age actors, you know, like I say, other actors in their mid-20s, we would all sort of take our different perspectives on it and say, oh, well, try it like this. You know, I would have 15-year-old actors giving me notes and giving me direction to say, oh, I think if you take longer here, or if you look this way first and then instead of that way. And Robert and I would try it and we'd step back and we'd be like, that's exactly right. That was exactly the right thing. And so having that sense of collaboration and equality and equity in the production was super inspiring. And that's something that I always really tried to stress to everybody that we worked with, regardless of their age, is that no matter what experience you do or don't have, or what age you do or don't have, there's always something that you can bring to the table to make things better.
Yeah. That's what a great, I mean, that kind of feeling that you described just really came across in the productions, because it did just have this feeling of an ensemble and a group, this collective, you know, this collective spirit. That's really cool. Do you you're an incredibly talented actor, and you're an incredibly talented you're incredibly talented comic actor, dramatic actor, just actor in general. But I've always been really interested in terms of comic acting, you know, that's really specific comic acting. You know, for me, that's not something that comes naturally to me. Like, I remember I took when I lived in DC, there was a conservatory I studied at, and at the Studio Theater, which was a great program. And one of the classes in the progression was a class in comedy, and by Nancy Paris, who was a great teacher. But it was really about like the technical aspects of comedy. You know, like she talked about like lifting and landing a line, and like that whole idea, which I'd never really known about, like, you know, she called it line move, where, you know, if you come in with a platter and you say dinner's ready and then the platter drops, it's funny. But if you come in and say dinner's ready as the platter is falling, it's not as funny, you know, and all those things. And I remember learning those things, and for me, they were just very, like, in that class, I don't think I've ever felt more unfunny in my life, because it was like, you know, it's like, you know, like walking and chewing gum and like trying. And it wasn't until a couple of years later that it was kind of like, oh, these things just kind of started, you know, they kind of become part of what you do, and you can understand that, you know, blah, blah, blah. But I know you talk about, which is cool, how much you watched, you know, kind of those classic comic movies growing up. But do you also feel like, is there a sense, do you feel like that there's a certain amount of your skill with comedy that you were born with, or that you do you know what I mean? Or do you feel like was it really that you just watched those films and just absorbed that stuff as a young person, or maybe a combination?
I think it was a combination. I think it was a combination, you know, and again, just going back to that sort of innate sense of weirdness, I think a lot of good comedy comes out of the unexpected, you know, and the unexpected comes from weird juxtapositions of things, or weird interpretations of things. And so I think taking that and sort of learning like you say, the very, very technical elements of good comedy early on, of whom, like, just the Marx Brothers really, I think, perfected comedy in my mind. You have Groucho's wit in writing. You have Harpo's physical comedy, and then like Chico's ability to like his cadence, his cadence and his rhythm of things, which I don't think he was as good of a writer as Groucho was, but his delivery, I think, was always a little bit sharper than Groucho's. And so you take like these like three masters of comedy, and then you mix, whatever inherent or innate weirdness I had as a kid, and I think that was a good cocktail for sort of beginning to understand comedy, because good comedy is very, very, very precise, and it's very, very technical, and that's what makes it, I think, A, difficult, and B, scary for a lot of actors.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of ways it can be more difficult than dramatic interpretation.
Yeah. No, I agree. I completely admire that, great comic acting. And it's interesting about the Marx Brothers, and just your inspiration from them. Another thing too that I love about, I think you also find great just human humor in the dramatic characters that you play. And is that something that you kind of actively look for, or does that kind of just organically come to you as you're reading a character, just the kind of human humor of that person?
I try to look for it. I try to find it, because I think it's just one of those truths of the kind of shared human experience. And certainly it's different for each of us as human beings, what we find funny and what we don't. But generally speaking, I think everyone likes to laugh, everyone likes to feel good, even when we're feeling bad. And one of the best ways to like feel good, even when we're feeling our worst, or whatever the circumstances are, is to like take those situations, take those feelings, and turn them upside down and find a way to laugh at them. However big or dark or painful or uncomfortable those things are, I think we all, to varying degrees, want to find a way to get through them, and one of the best ways to get through them, I think, is laughing your way through it. It takes the power out of the pain and the darkness of things to own the humor of it.
Yeah, interesting. Oh, that's it. I love that. Yeah.
And so I do, I really try to find that in characters that I play. I mean, even when I was doing Macbeth, I tried to find ironies and juxtapositions and the misunderstandings that can be funny, even in a wry, like kind of painful, pointed way. I think you still need to find that to make it really human, because like I say, I think that we all want to laugh.
Yeah. That, it's really interesting too, because I know when I look at myself, like as as an actor, if I'm working on a particular play and a character, there's a certain way where over the years, I feel like I've become more comfortable with kind of my own humor, that's, as you said, that weirdness, that I've got my own humor that's very different from anyone else's, but I've started to, feel more comfortable around that, and tapping into it. But it's funny because immediately, whenever I'm working on something on a play, and I feel that sense of pressure to find the humor from either the director or the other, like, this needs to be more funny, or this needs to be, I like completely shut down. I freeze. You know
Sure.
what I mean? And I don't
Yeah.
have that. It's one of those things that I admire in people that can kind of know that they can tap into humor, that they can find it, you know? I mean, if somebody says this needs to be more funny or whatever, and they can be like, oh, I'll find that thing. Whereas for me, I just like, I'm not funny. So I'm not funny enough here. And I don't know how to, it's just an interesting, um, so for me, it's just been a fascinating process and trying to look at, okay, how do I kind of get back to find that particular thing that for me, I know is my own kind of inner humor that but also brings out
Yeah.
what's necessary in this character. It's an
Yeah.
interesting balance.
And I, I think that goes back to why it's so difficult and so scary for so many actors to take on comedic roles.
Yeah.
Because I think when you're doing something like, you're doing I don't know, some intensely painful, cathartic, dramatic performance. Um, Obviously it's like very scary and intimidating to be vulnerable in that way. And in the sort of like energetic circuit that I believe in between like a performer on stage and an audience member sitting in a seat,
Mhm.
um, I think you get a lot more forgiveness, you get a lot more leeway from an audience member, generally speaking, when you're kind of like putting your heart on the line
Mhm.
in that way. Tears streaking down your face or whatever. I think audience members have a little bit more sympathy for you. But when you're trying to be funny and you're not committed to it,
Yeah.
there is nothing more humiliating than like laying down a punchline and then crickets.
Right. Right.
Like that is
Right.
tremendously painful.
It
That is
is.
tremendously painful as a performer.
Yeah.
And I think the remedy to that is letting go of preconceived notions of what is funny, trying to
Yeah.
define funny in some sort of way.
Yeah.
And so it drives me crazy when I get direction like, oh, that needs to be more funny. It's like someone telling you like, oh, you need to be more sad. Like,
Right. Right.
like let's clarify, let's
Yeah.
sharpen that. And so for me, it's like in those moments where something's not working, I think leaning really hard when you're in rehearsals and you're playing with
Mhm.
things and finding things, like leaning really hard into the weird is a really liberating way to just like find
Yeah.
what makes people smile, what makes people chuckle, like even if it's totally off the mark and doesn't work for the scene or the character or whatever. It starts opening the door for moving into that space of like, okay, I can tread in this place and
Yeah.
hopefully find something to make
That's
people
yeah.
smile. Yeah.
Right. Right. That's yeah. Well, and it's interesting what you say too about yeah that how vulnerable it is. I mean, trying to find something funny, and yeah, I think for me that's really an interesting when I can feel safe to be vulnerable, I think I can feel safe to be funny.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that's yeah, it's really interesting. Well, Matt, uh, one of the many things that I really admire about you and the ways that we've had a chance to work together over the years as, we've worked in scene study class together, on stage together, different things. We worked in the Ironweed artistic team together.
Mhm.
Everything that you do, you bring, you just kind of, you bring your fullest self as an artist. And I wondered if you could talk about for you, because you write, you're a musician, you act, you do lighting design, you direct. Just talk about for you how your different artistic selves feed each other.
Oh man. Um, uh, I don't know. I don't know.
That's great.
It has just always kind of all felt like just different facets of myself,
Mhm.
different faces of very, very rough gem.
Mhm.
um, and it's so funny, the only way that I can really makes sense for me to think about it and articulate it was this um, phrase that my kind of godfather, my de facto godfather, told me one time after my brother died. And it really sort of encompasses so much of like who I am and my experience and like the interconnectedness of all of those things. And he said it so simply and so succinctly, and it just really makes sense for me. And he just looked at me and he said, "It's all part of it." And that's kind of my whole life, you know. It's the ups and downs of life, how things as like an artist and a husband, a father, you know, how all of these things sort of link together. I can't define how they do, but they do, you know. I can be sitting in the seat of driving the dad car, playing with my kids, and there's elements of, you know, my actor self and my director self and my stage manager self that all come out to just try to inform a situation where the things that I've learned in those different roles as a human being serve me, you know, all those different lessons, all those different experiences serve me in some kind of way. And I try to bring that to whatever artistic endeavor I'm doing as well, you know, because it's all part of it.
Oh yeah, I really love that phrase. That's because it's in a way, yeah, it just kind of breaks down that feeling that like there's this piece, there's this piece, they're all part of the same river, or all part of the same. That's I really like that phrase.
And there's so many, you know, there's so many threads, there's so many little webs that weave around each other that, you know, you don't always see how this part of yourself over here is connected to this part of yourself over here, because there's so many other moving pieces that all you know, link some way over time.
Yeah. Well, you talk about, you know, just your experiences as a husband and a dad. I'm just, what are some of your favorite experiences as a husband and a father? You know,
There's a lot.
yeah,
You know, Scarlett and I just had our 8-year anniversary last week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And but you know, we've known each other since high school. We've known each other for 20 years now. And in that time, over the last 8 years, you know, we're always excited each day to kind of see what happens, you know, one way or the other. But certainly one of the, I think, greatest shared memories that we have, just the two of us in that regard, was time that we spent in Istanbul together. And that was just like such an amazing sort of formative experience for our relationship, because we were both so in love with that city and the culture, and just, you know, living 100% our life for whatever it was, like 6 weeks, something like that, in Istanbul. She had been living there, going to school for longer than that. And so that was just like a really amazing experience for the two of us. We have a really special relationship with the moon, the both of us. And so, you know, the Turkish flag has the moon and the star, and there's a lot of references to the moon in Turkish culture. And it really laid a really interesting foundation for our relationship, sharing that experience together. Seeing whirling dervishes live, kind of like was a very moving spiritual experience for me, for both of us. But then in terms of like being a dad, it's insane. It's absolutely insane to be the steward of two other human beings, like health and safety and well-being. And, you know, there's this tremendous responsibility to help craft a halfway decent human life, you know. And sometimes the magnitude, like the scope of that responsibility, just really gets me kind of spun. But I don't know if this is like a too basic of an answer, you know, but every day there's some just beautiful, magical thing that my kids do that just makes me so grateful for them and for my role as their dad, because they are such wonderful little weirdos themselves, you know. And I guess generally speaking, that's the thing that makes me so excited about being a parent, about being a father, is seeing that strangeness in my kids.
Oh gosh.
Because you know, I think that the human experience, when you just really start boiling it down, and you know, you want to go into like a really weird, like wigged out man kind of exploration of the human experience, it's like, it's very weird what we're doing. It's like very remarkable that we got to the point as human beings to be so conscious, to have the capacity to be so strange. And I really, that really excites me, you know. That really excites me, and I really want to like cultivate that and nurture that in my own kids, because I think that's what makes life worth living.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Wow. That's wonderful. Well, I think it's really wonderful too to hear, yeah, that you, just how you felt supported and being uniquely who you were as a young person, and you know how important that is for you as a dad, you know, to do that for your own kids.
Totally. I, you know, in my experience working with young people through Warehouse 21 and through the Lensic, you know, I hear a lot of these horror stories. Like, none of them are, you know, horrible, but you know, I hear these stories of like kids in their teen years, like not having a sense of self because of those parts of themselves not being supported and nurtured. And you know, I just, there's no reason to not lean into who you are, you know. And so in that professional aspect, and most certainly in my personal capacity as a dad, it's like, do it, be that weirdo.
Yeah.
Why not?
Right. Wave your freak flag. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's great. Wow. Well, yeah, it's interesting that this weekend is the year ago this weekend that the Aliens opened, which is the last production of the Ironweed, our last production. It was it was one of the last things, probably live theater wise, in Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Your last time on stage. Just an incredible production that Len Goodwin directed. Just incredibly moving, and I felt, even though it was really difficult that that the production got, you know, we had to pull the production halfway through the run. I was really grateful for Lynn and for you all that it did get to open, you know, and did get to run for, you know, I think it was 7 performances. And I just want to just talk about that experience, because that play was so moving, so beautifully directed, performed, designed, and just talk about your experience with that play, that production.
It was, it's like, it's still like kind of raw for me to talk about, you know. And you and I have talked about this a little bit over the course of this year, you know, this feeling of just like losing things over and over and over again. But like, particularly for the Aliens, it was such a beautiful thing to be a part of, you know. And I know that we all say that as actors and directors and producers with, you know, projects that we work on, but with the Aliens, it was like, there were so many people that I trust and respect and admire that were on board, just like 100% with that production, between yourself as a producer, with you know, with Kita helping us throughout the production of that, certainly with Lynn at the helm directing, our amazing, you know, design and production staff, and the other 2 actors, Mickey and Nikua. There was just this incredible sense of, going back to what we were saying earlier, of like freedom and safety and liberation in the space of working in that production, which is rare, I think, for a lot of us to find kind of the perfect storm of that stuff. You know, a lot of times, at least in my experience, you know, you go into a production in whatever role you're in, and you're always hoping for that. You're always hoping for the best case situation, but there are times when, you know, there are reservations or there are boundaries or you know, whatever, that sort of factor in just with working with other people. And it was really like, I couldn't have asked for a better environment in which to rehearse and explore Annie Baker's incredibly beautiful script. And find our way into making these real people on stage. And so it was like this immensely rewarding process, and immensely rewarding product that we found ourselves with, which I think just sort of kind of fuels that sense of loss for me. You know,
Yeah.
if it was just some phoned in production where I had 2 weeks of rehearsal and wasn't really emotionally invested, it would have been like, oh yeah, you know, that's sad. But it was just such a I can't even like articulate exactly the sort of like the freedom of that experience.
One of the things I remember, because I know, you know, Annie Baker writes in the stage directions that I think about a third of the play that she wants to be in silence.
Yeah.
And I remember when Lynn was talking about, you know, first talking about the play and talking about working on it, and she said, you know, and she had acted in Circle Mirror Transformation, which is her, and an Annie Baker play, but how important that was, and really, and talk about how, because that was one of the really moving parts of that play, was the silences and what they were filled with. Both what they were filled with the people on stage, but also what they allowed the audience to experience with the people on stage. And I just wondered, with working with Lynn on that, just if you could talk just a little bit about how you all found those places and filled them, you know, because they were all just incredibly filled.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful aspect of that script in particular, of the aliens in particular, and how clearly Annie Baker states as the playwright, you know, you must have this silence, and the more you can put in there, the more effective it's going to be. And I think it's super true. And it's really hard. It's really hard because you know, anyone can just stand on stage and do nothing, be quiet for 5 minutes straight, you know, but that is not informed by anything. And that, to me, you know, I've known Lynn for a long time as well, and I've worked with her in a vast variety of productions and classes that we've been in together, classes that she's taught. And Lynn, one of the many things to which is a testament to Lynn as such an incredible director, is that she understands she understands that information, like how things are informed through your body and through your presence, you know, and how to maintain that. And so one of the things that we spent a lot of time doing in rehearsals was quietly moving with each other. And Lynn would give us direction in terms of like how to be physically in each other's space without verbally communicating, and, you know, inhabiting the space in ways where it's like, you know, is your body language going to dictate, you know, tell the story of I might hurt you, or does your body language indicate something non-verbally of like you're safe, or come to me, or get away from me, and finding ways to articulate that non-verbally. And, you know, we would go really big with like super big over the top physical manifestations of the direction that she would give us, to really, really slow, quiet, almost totally stationary explorations of that. And so running the gamut of all of those different emotions and all of those different relationships, and that's I think the kind of word that I'm looking for with Lynn as a director, is that she really understands those relationships both between characters and within the space. Mm-hmm. And so exploring those relationships gave us the tools that we needed to inhabit space without words, but still having all of that emotional information constantly churning.
Yeah.
And it's hard, you know, and I think it's kind of related in a lot of ways to a certain type of comedy. What strikes me thinking about it is the ways in which it allows the audience to move through those feelings, whatever's happening. And the example that I'll use, there's this really hilarious, I thought it was hilarious. The actress and comedian Kristen Schaal, she was doing this stand-up gig with another comedian, and they had this routine where Kristen Schaal was doing this ridiculous horse dance, mm-hmm. while the other comic, for as long as they could go, and sometimes it went over half an hour, them doing this bit, mm-hmm. him just going, Kristen Schaal is a horse, Kristen Schaal is a horse, look at her go, look at her dance, Kristen Schaal is a horse. And, you know, they do it like the first minute where that's all that they're doing. Yeah. You hear in recordings the audience just cracking up. Then after about 5 minutes, it is not funny. It is not funny anymore. No one is having a good time because it's them doing just the same thing over and over again, the repetition of this joke. But then, like, the absurdity of the time that they've been committed to it, just 100% full bore committed to this joke, the audience starts laughing at it again. They start cracking up because it's so absurd. And it goes through like these, you know, you can feel in the room that the audience like resents them for keeping the joke up for so long. And I think the same is true for anything where silence is required, because mm-hmm. it's like you feel something in the silence. And like once you get through the first wave of processing what you're feeling in a silence, mm-hmm. it is deeply uncomfortable for as an actor and as an audience member to be in that silence. And it really forces you both as a performer and as an audience member to move through that place of being uncomfortable and examine, like, why is this making me uncomfortable? Mm. You know, and I think that's why it's so powerful in Annie Baker's writing to really to make that silence kind of the fourth, or in a lot of ways fifth character of that play.
Yeah, what a cool process too that Lynn went through with you all to help you find that. I mean, physical, bringing your physicality and you connecting all the elements around that. I mean, because, you know, it's interesting for me. One of my favorite experiences in the theater, whether it's on stage or in the audience, are those moments where there's a silence and you know that everyone in that room is sharing something. It may not be the exact same feeling, but you're all dipping into the same pool of truth. That's what I feel like, and there were so many of those moments in that, and just really interesting to hear the exploration process around that.
Yeah, it was at times very difficult, but it was so rewarding. It was so rewarding to fill that space.
Yeah.
And just before we move on, and I'm sorry to interrupt us here. I don't know if you guys can see. There's Hamlet. I don't know if you can hear. He's behind me whimpering, asking to be let out. So I'm going to let him out real quick.
Absolutely.
Because I'm sure as much as anyone watching this would love to see Matt Sanford just cleaning up dog poop for a minute, I'm going to spare everyone.
Good plan.
Go on. Goodbye, buddy.
And we're back.
And we're back.
I I'm listening for because our cat Calvin, I'm in our studio, and sometimes he'll be meowing at the door. So I'm prepared as well to possibly have to do a little quick pet duty. So yeah, yeah, that's right. Um, I'm curious, Matt, we've talked about this at different points over the course of the past year, but I keep thinking about this, moving through this period that we're in of the pandemic. Um, and, I have a feeling, I don't have that sense of like, oh, we just need to get back to it once we're all back together. Just get back to it the way things were before. And I feel like that around things in general. I mean, even when we talked earlier about kind of there's a certain simplicity around or space around life that we've had that I don't necessarily want to lose, going forward. But also I feel like in terms of like live performance, I just think about that, like what is it that's going to be resonant? What stories and in a way, to me, it's exciting to be open and think that it may be something totally different or what. And I just wonder your thoughts on moving through and out of this pandemic. Yeah, just kind of what live performance might be or how it might
Mhm.
evolve.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see how, in what ways both creators and audiences come back to the live experience. I think that generally speaking, there will be a hunger for it, obviously, because I think we're all hardwired to want to share that experience of storytelling. So I think that once it's safe and possible, like people are going to be kind of clamoring to get back to it. But in terms of like what will be made, what people are going to want to produce, or what kind of new works are going to come out, I can't wrap my mind around what is going to be possible.
Mhm.
All of us are every single day kind of living this collective shared, like, slow trauma. I mean, for a lot of people it's like a very big trauma, depending on the proximity to the losses that we're all sort of witnessing. But we're all kind of in this gridlock of losing losing a little bit every day and gaining a little bit every day. And it's like, um a colleague of mine from the Lensic, I think, articulated it really well in terms of like, we're running a race and we have no idea where the finish line is.
Yeah.
And we're exhausted because of it. And so in terms of like what is going to be made, I suspect that there's going to be like some incorporation of what we're doing, like this
Mhm.
Zoom element or
Mhm.
video element. But at the same time, it's like I don't know how effective that will be in terms of like a live experience. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. I think that there's going to be a lot of really great original work that comes out of it, because like we were saying earlier, I think that this situation has forced a lot of people, particularly creatives, to like lean into their perspective and lean into this experience in a way of examining, what do I want and how can I do that? So I think that there's going to be a tremendous wave of good work, whatever that work is. I have no idea, but I
Yeah.
think that there's going to be a lot of very, very good work that people bring to this, just hungry and ready to make things and see things and do things.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I really like, I am in that same place of just feeling like I don't know, but it feels good not to know. Like, I don't feel like I have to know, like, what's it going to
Yeah,
be like? I like the
yeah,
idea that, we'll see. I mean, we're learning now, like what and we'll see as we continue to, as you said, move toward that finish line that we don't know where it is at this point.
yeah.
Really interesting, Matt. Well, I want to, this is for everybody watching. We actually have a super cool treat at the end of this interview, which is that Matt, Matt, who's also a musician, that you're gonna just play a little something for us that you've composed to take us to the end of the interview, which I'm really thrilled about. And I want to just ask before we get into that, when was it for you that music became part of your life?
Um, Again, it was like really, really early on. Both of my parents had really eclectic tastes in music growing up. So, I'd be listening to Glenn Miller at one point, and then, my mom would throw on Dwight Yoakam, and then the next tape would be my dad putting on the Talking Heads, or uh, uh, Fine Young Cannibals was a big one. I remember that tape. It was a big part of my childhood.
Yeah.
And so there were all of those aspects of music just kind of always being present in my life, kind of coupled with the time that I spent again with my grandparents. My grandpa was a huge Frank Sinatra fan. So lots of Sinatra, on top of which, all of the traditional music of northern New Mexico was a huge part of my life growing up, from my mom's side of the family. So just having this very early exposure to just a melange of different musical styles, and seeing other adults' passion for it, I think just kind of left that innate door inside myself open. Because just like storytelling, I feel like music is just an inherent part of the human experience, and so that door was not only left open but kind of propped open for me with those experiences, and so yeah, just growing up with it and having freedom to explore different music without judgment. I think the very first tape that I bought with my own money, I was maybe 9 years old, and I bought Green Day's Dookie, Green Day's first album.
Excellent.
That was the first tape that I bought, and I remember being at the old Rare Bear music store and like going through the tapes with my mom.
Yeah.
And I was watching MTV at 9 years old, and the video for their song Basket Case was just like my favorite song, and so I knew what the album was called, and I picked it out, and I handed my mom the tape, and I handed her my allowance money. And she was looking at it, she was like, I don't know that I want to buy you an album called Dookie, but it's your money. Let's roll with it.
That's right. You've been following your own path since you're little, so let's just keep down that path.
We're gonna stay with it.
That's cool.
So yeah, again, just having that support around being able to explore the infinite depths of what's out there.
Yeah,
it's cool.
Yeah. Oh wow. Well, I want to, because you have so many different facets to your life as an artist. I wanted to just finish off, just if you could. I know you've been working on some actual visual art pieces, and could you just show us a little sample of what you've been working on just during this COVID period?
Totally. I have a couple pieces here that I'll share. So this is one. Yeah, I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And the medium, what is the medium on this?
So it's actually crayons. It's just crayons. A return to my childish self.
Excellent.
Every day is a return to my childish self, it seems. But yeah, so I had seen or read in like a sort of alternative art magazine, like years and years and years ago, kind of right when I maybe turned 20 or so, a thing about an artist who would line up crayons at the top of a canvas and then hit them with a high-powered heat lamp and just let them all run down the face of the canvas to make these interesting striped pieces. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. I kind of want to play with that, because I'd never heard of anyone using melted wax. At that point in my life, I wasn't aware of artists doing anything like that. I was like, well, that sounds kind of cool. So I went out and I bought like one of those big, 400 crayon boxes, and dug out my old like high-powered heat gun from working in a wood shop, and just started screwing around with it, and it became a very meditative, very, again, like liberating experience
Yeah.
for me playing. There's something about because I had sort of dabbled with like watercolors and acrylics at different points in my life, and while I enjoyed them, none of them felt as like both emotionally and tactilely inspiring as working with wax does for me. And so I've just kind of decided that that's my medium. Here's a slightly larger piece. And
That's
actually
beautiful.
this one's vertical. It's supposed to go vertical. I'm getting a lot of glare there. But,
That's beautiful. Really beautiful.
thank you.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah, and it's been cool. I've had a lot of great feedback on them. I have a buddy who has a space that he's actually going to start showing some of these. I'm very excited. It's a very prestigious space. It's the Turquoise Trail Pack and Ship out by the Santa Fe Brewing Company.
That's
I
very
have
cool
a friend
though.
who just bought that business, and he's
That's
trying to turn it into like a cool little art
that's
space
very cool.
/ pack and ship.
Yeah.
So he has a little reading area, and a lot of our friends who do visual art have some pieces up in there, and a lot of
Nice.
makers and crafts people. So keep an eye out for the next hot Santa Fe gallery.
We'll do.
The Turquoise Trail
Pack and
Pack and
ship.
Ship.
That's very cool though. I mean, and just just to learn about that medium. I mean, that's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's cool. There's something about the smell of crayons that is so specific. And if you know that smell, you know exactly what it is. You can be anywhere in the world and smell the smell of Crayola crayons, and you know exactly what it is. And that, for me, it really unlocks this place for me in my head and in my heart that is very much tied to that very innocent, like childish place.
Yeah.
And so when I'm working with it, and the heat gun is heating up the wax, and like the whole room is then permeated with that smell of Crayola crayons, it just really drops me back into that place of like no judgment, kind of innocence,
Yeah.
and freedom. It's a cool sensory experience.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, I'm gonna do some just a few housekeeping things for everybody, but please stay with us, because Matt, when we finish up, Matt's gonna play a piece for us on the guitar that he's composed, and I'm super psyched about. But Matt, I just want to thank you very much for this time, for this conversation, for what you shared. For me, it's just been very inspiring, uplifting, and I've also learned a lot. Just greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, and very much the same. I'm very honored to be here doing this, and very honored and grateful for our time and our history and our future. Yeah.
Thanks, man. Me too. So everyone, stay with us for as Matt will take us out with a piece that he's composed. But just to let you all know that if you are not on our email list and you'd like to join to find out about future interviews and projects, you can email me at ironweedsantafe@gmail.com. Put you on our email list. I also just want to say a big thanks to Theater Santa Fe, and actually Matt's wife Scarlett is a huge help to us in posting all of our interviews on their website. They have them on theatersantafe.org on an online tab, and you can see all of our interviews on the website, as well as just a lot of wonderful things going on around town with different companies and different artists. Thank you all again for joining us, and please just stay with us as Matt takes us out with some music that he's composed. Matt, thanks again. Yeah. And feel free to tell us a little bit about this, or you can just jump right in, whatever works.
Well, I won't belabor it too much, but my sort of experimental guitar stuff, for a long time, I was doing like the singer-songwriter thing. and writing very specific songs, very traditional style songs. But with this new sort of project that I'm working on, it's again more about freedom and flexibility and uncertainty and not knowing. So what I'm going to do now is I have a motif, I guess you could say, that I have been kicking around. But outside of that, a lot of what's going to happen is just going to be sort of improvised, and we'll see what comes out of it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Lovely, Matt. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.